Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Year 8 of our relationship, I took a knife from my doctor boyfriend, Ethan Sullivan. He promised I could ask for anything in return. Everyone assumed I would use this chance to ask for a proposal, but I remained calm and simply said, "Let's break up." Then I turned and walked away. Ethan sneered, making a bet with the others. "She's just a desperate girl looking for attention. I bet she won't last 3 days before coming back to beg me to reconcile." But he was wrong because I had a secret. I had been reborn. In my past life, I had succeeded in proposing to Ethan, but his white moonlight, the woman he had always put above me, Jessica Carter, jumped off a rooftop and took her own life. Ethan blamed me for everything. On our wedding night, he slashed my face and locked me in a dark, narrow basement. After I got pregnant, he forced me to take excessive supplements every day. When I finally went into labor, the baby had grown so large that I couldn't give birth naturally. In the end, I bled out, my body torn apart from the impossible delivery, and died in agony. Now I had returned to the moment I took the knife for Ethan. This time I would give him exactly what he wanted. In the surgeon's office, a sharp pain in my arm snapped me back to reality. The nurse was wrapping the final layer of bandages and gently reminded me not to get the wound wet for the next few days. Across the office, Ethan scoffed. "It's just a scratch. Since when did you become so delicate?" I didn't respond. The other doctors in the office exchanged awkward glances. They had all been there when it happened. The attacker was an ex-convict, a thug who had been released from prison last year. He was tall and broad, his face covered in scars. The fruit knife he used to stab me was at least 12 inches long. The wound on my arm had split open to the bone and required over 20 stitches, but his original target had been Ethan's heart. My silence seemed to irritate Ethan. His gaze darkened and his sharp features turned cold. "Stop acting up," he said icily. "I already told you you saved me, so you can ask for any reward. Isn't that enough? What's with the attitude?" At some point, the boy I had grown up with, my childhood sweetheart, had stopped speaking to me with warmth. Now all that was left in his voice was arrogance and condescension, as if he were addressing someone beneath him. His tenderness was reserved for someone else, the girl he cherished more than anything, Jessica Carter, the orphan he had rescued during a flood relief mission. My eyes flickered to the pink bunny hair tie on his wrist. Suppressing the bitter ache in my chest, I smiled and asked, "Anything? Any request at all?" Ethan froze, as if something had crossed his mind. He subconsciously glanced at the hair tie. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes, but he quickly composed himself. Clenching his molars in irritation, he let out a frustrated sigh but still gave a reluctant nod. One of his colleagues in the office immediately started teasing. "Well then, Dr. Sullivan, I guess you'll have to." Now the others joined in laughing. "Yeah, Dr. Sullivan, after 8 years together, it's about time. We're all ready to attend the wedding." Listening to their playful banter, I was just about to tell Ethan I wanted to break up when suddenly a young nurse rushed into the office looking panicked. "Dr. Sullivan, it's bad. Jessica is threatening to kill herself." Again. If I had counted correctly, this was Jessica Carter's 108th suicide attempt. Just like in my past life, the moment the nurse finished speaking, Ethan rushed out of the room. On the hospital rooftop, Jessica stood on the edge, her eyes swollen and red, her delicate face pale. She was wearing Ethan's white dress shirt. Underneath, her bare slender legs trembled in the cold air. Suddenly, I remembered she had been there that night too. The night I took the knife for Ethan. He had held her protectively in his arms. She had walked out of his private lounge wearing the very same white dress shirt that I had bought for him. "Lena," she sobbed, her voice trembling as she looked at me. "You took a knife for Ethan. He promised you could ask for anything you wanted and you love him so much. Of course you're going to ask him to marry you, right?" Then she turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Ethan, but if I have to spend the rest of my life without you, I'd rather die." Tears streamed down her face, each drop hitting Ethan like a knife to the heart. "Come down first," he pleaded, his voice low and full of concern. "I'll explain everything to you. Just come down." Ethan had always cared about Jessica Carter. She was just a little girl who loved pink, he once said. That was why the pink Dior handbag, he had originally bought for my birthday had become her reward for passing her college exams. She was afraid of thunderstorms, so on countless nights, whenever she called, Ethan would rush to her side. Even on the night of my grandfather's funeral, there were no available flights that night, but when Jessica called crying on the phone, Ethan had turned to me furious and spat out, "If you're going to die, at least pick a better day." I remembered the time Ethan Sullivan confessed to me. Back then he swore he would always love me unconditionally, that I would be the only one in his heart. But when 26-year-old Ethan met 18-year-old Jessica Carter, all of his love, all of his devotion was given to her instead. In my past life I had been blinded by my emotions, convinced I could still hold on to him, and in the end I paid a devastating price. This time I didn't want him anymore. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Jessica's heart-wrenching sobs. Ethan had already pulled her off the ledge, holding her tightly in his arms. Their bodies were pressed so close together I felt sick just looking at them. Ethan was still trembling from fear, his thin lips quivering. Again and again he kissed the top of Jessica's head. "Thank God you're okay." Jessica clung to him, sobbing so hard her whole body was shaking. "Would you have chosen Rain if I had?" Her voice was full of despair. "If the answer is yes, then you should have just let me die." Ethan gently wiped the tears from her face, his gaze dark and heavy as he looked at me. His voice was calm yet filled with meaning. "It's just a marriage. Rain in my heart, you'll never come first." With that, he let out a long sigh, as if forced into a corner. Lowering his eyes, he added, "After all, you've been with me for 8 years. I don't love you anymore. But back then when I nearly drowned, you saved me. And after that, you followed me around like a devoted housewife, always taking care of me without complaint. I owe you for that." The moment he said those words, everyone around us froze in shock. So it was me. I was the one who saved Ethan from drowning all those years ago. That was how we ended up together, but that was a long, long time ago. All this time, he had assumed that I used that act of kindness as leverage to demand things from him. If I had known he would turn into this, I never would have saved him. Neither then nor now. The pitying glances from the people around me were suffocating. I was tired of their looks, of their judgment, of their whispers. Letting out a sharp, cold laugh, I said, "Ethan, I'm busy. When are you going to fulfill your promise?" Ethan let out a mocking laugh in return, as if he had seen right through me. A knowing look flashed in his eyes. "So desperate to marry me, aren't you?" As he spoke, he gently stroked Jessica's earlobe, comforting her like she was the most fragile thing in the world. Then, as if reluctantly humoring me, he said, "Fine, just tell me, when do you want to get married?" His tone was indifferent, dismissive, as if he already knew my answer. "Since you went through all this trouble just to marry me, I might as well." I cut him off immediately. "Let's break up." Ethan's eyes snapped up to look at me, his expression frozen in shock. Confusion, disbelief, and growing anger flashed across his face. You want to break up?" Ignoring the look of joy in Jessica's eyes, I met Ethan's gaze with unwavering calm. "Yes." His brows furrowed as if he couldn't comprehend my words. "What kind of game are you playing now?" His voice was cold. "Who doesn't know that you, Rain Porter, have been chasing after me like a dog since high school? No matter how many times I tried to push you away, you refused to leave. And now, after finally getting the perfect opportunity to marry me, you suddenly want to break up? Rain, stop lying to yourself." His eyes narrowed slightly, and then his lips curled into a smug smirk. "You're still wearing the ring I gave you." He must have thought he had caught me in a moment of weakness, as if he had proof that I could never leave him. But I simply removed the ring from my finger and, without hesitation, threw it off the rooftop. "Thanks for reminding me of that ring." Ethan had bought it with his very first scholarship as a birthday gift for me. It had both of our initials engraved on the inside. I once got into a car accident and fell unconscious, but even then my fingers never let go of that ring. Ethan knew how much I valued him. He knew exactly how much that ring meant to me, and now I had thrown it away like it was nothing. His brows knit together, his expression dark and unreadable. Even so, he still refused to believe I would leave him. I heard him let out a cold chuckle. "Rain, I don't care what kind of game you're playing, but let me tell you this. If you apologize right now, I'll pretend none of this ever happened. If you still want to be my wife, I'll give you that position. I smiled faintly. Ethan, I wish you the best, and I hope I get what I deserve too. With that, I turned and walked away. As I left, I heard Jessica whisper to Ethan, "Aren't you going after her?" Ethan let out a scornful laugh. "Go after her? She'll come crawling back. A woman who would do anything to carry my child would never be able to leave me because I was pregnant." It happened when Ethan and Jessica had a fight. He had gotten drunk and mistook me for Jessica in a night of reckless passion. Not long after I found out I was pregnant. Ethan knew about it too. In my past life, I used gratitude and love to tie him down in marriage, but when Jessica killed herself, Ethan turned his hatred onto me. He forced me to eat again and again, making sure my belly grew bigger and bigger. And when it was finally time to give birth, he refused to take me to the hospital. The baby was too large and the labor was unbearable. Even now I could still remember the pain, how it felt like my entire body was being torn apart, how my hands and feet went numb, how my eyes filled with blood-red agony. I screamed and screamed, using every ounce of strength in my body, but the baby wouldn't come out. In the end, I bled to death as I lay there, my blood pooling beneath me. The baby was trapped inside, suffocating to death along with me. This time things would be different. I placed a hand over my stomach, feeling the faint movements of the tiny life growing inside me. It was time to end this. I went home and took a nap, an unusually long one for full hours. When I woke up, there was a message on my phone from Ethan. "Sullivan, my mom is sick. Come over." Ethan was a bastard, but his mother had always been kind to me. My parents had been close friends with Ethan's parents. After they passed away, Mrs. Sullivan took me in and loved me like her own daughter. But the moment I read the message, I knew it wasn't from Ethan. I knew Ethan's way of texting too well. He never used punctuation. But this message was neatly structured, almost deliberate. There was only one person who could freely touch Ethan's phone like this. Jessica Carter. I knew this was a trap, and yet I still went. As soon as I stepped into the cell of an estate, a bucket of ice-cold water was dumped over my head. The freezing sensation wrapped around me, instantly sending a sharp pain through my stomach. Laughter erupted around me. When I opened my eyes, I saw a group of young men and women standing inside the villa, watching me with mocking amusement. Them stood Jessica Carter. She made me kneel and a hard kick landed on the back of my legs, knocking me down to the ground. Jessica smirked. "Do you even realize how much Ethan hates you?" Her voice dripped with contempt. "You filthy woman. You actually had the nerve to get pregnant behind my back." She grabbed a bottle of strong liquor from the table. "You think you can trap Ethan with this disgusting trick? You think this baby will keep him by your side?" She raised the bottle higher. "Tonight, I'm going to make sure you regret ever carrying Ethan's child." Jessica expected me to beg, to cry, to resist, but I didn't. When she forced the alcohol down my throat, I didn't fight back. Instead, I drank the entire bottle in one go. Not a single drop was left. I looked up at her, my voice cold. "I don't want Ethan anymore, and I don't want this child either." Jessica stared at me in shock. Then, as if realizing I was serious, she cursed under her breath, calling me insane. The next second, she grabbed a curling iron, its tip burning red hot, and pressed it toward my eyes. Just then, someone in the room screamed in horror. "She's bleeding so much blood." A sharp, searing pain erupted in my abdomen. My face turned pale as paper. Jessica hesitated for only a moment. Then her expression hardened. Before anyone could react, she threw aside the curling iron and stomped down hard onto my stomach. The pain was excruciating. I didn't even get the chance to scream before everything went black. At the hospital, Ethan Sullivan sat in his office, casually flipping through patient files. A nurse rushed in, holding a medical consent form in her hands. Her face was full of panic. "Dr. Sullivan, something terrible happened." Before she could finish, Ethan cut her off coldly. "I'm not with her anymore. Don't mention her to me again." The nurse's face paled. "But she was just brought in by an ambulance. She's in critical condition. Massive blood loss from pregnancy complications. We need approval to transfer blood from other hospitals. Please sign this consent form." Ethan barely spared her a glance. Then, in front of her shocked and horrified expression, he took the form and tore it to pieces. "Do you think I'd fall for such a pathetic lie?" He sneered. Rain Porter must have bribed my people to put on this ridiculous act. His voice turned colder. Rain loves me too much to ever let go of my child. There's no way she would get rid of it. He stood up and brushed past the nurse, ignoring her desperate attempts to stop him. Even if she were dying right now, I wouldn't sign that form. With that, he turned off his phone, switching it to Do Not Disturb mode, just in case Rain tried to pull any more tricks. Then he continued about his day as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until 10 p.m. that he finally turned his phone back on. Instantly, over 100 missed calls flooded his screen. Even the hospital director had called him dozens of times. Ethan's brows furrowed. Rain had actually gone as far as disturbing the director. She was getting more shameless by the day. With an irritated sigh, he called the director back, ready to apologize, but before he could say a word, the director's cold voice cut through the line. Get back to the hospital now. Then the call ended abruptly. Ethan felt uneasy, but he still drove to the hospital, frustration burning in his chest. He failed to notice the way Jessica, sitting beside him, had turned completely pale. For years, Ethan had been a star doctor, highly respected by the director. This was the first time he had ever been reprimanded. His anger boiled over as he stormed out of the elevator, ready to make Rain pay for embarrassing him. But the moment he stepped out, a hand swung across his face, slapping him hard. His head snapped to the side, his jaw tightening as he raised his hand, ready to retaliate. Then he saw who had hit him. His mother. Ethan froze, his mind went blank. Mom, why are you here? Mrs. Sullivan's eyes were bloodshot, her voice shaking with rage as she shouted at Ethan. Sullivan, her son, you heartless bastard. Her voice cracked with fury. Why didn't you sign the consent form? Her chest heaved as she pointed a trembling finger at him, her body nearly collapsing from sheer anger. Do you even realize what you've done? Because of you, Rain suffered a massive miscarriage, lost too much blood. She choked on her words before forcing them out, her voice almost breaking. They had to remove her uterus. Ethan staggered back as if someone had just ripped the ground out from under him. Before he could even process those words, a police officer stepped forward, holding up a phone. A video began playing on the screen. In the footage, Rain lay unconscious on a stretcher. Her white dress stained a horrifying shade of red. Blood had poured out so much that even the stretcher itself was drenched in crimson. Ethan's pupils contracted sharply, his entire body going stiff as he stared at the scene. And then the officer's next words shattered everything. Mr. Sullivan, our investigation has confirmed that the mastermind behind the assault on your fiancée was none other than Miss Jessica Carter. What? Ethan's head snapped up, his sharp, handsome face filled with disbelief and terror. That's impossible. Rain can't have lost the baby. She loves me. She wanted to marry me. She would never. His voice faltered, his mind desperate to reject the truth. This is fake. It's fake. It has to be. Beside them, the hospital director let out a heavy sigh. He signaled for a nurse to help support Mrs. Sullivan, who was on the verge of collapsing. Then he stepped toward Ethan, his expression filled with disappointment. Rain took a knife for you, and this is how you repay her? The director's voice was heavy with condemnation. You let her suffer, let her bleed, and even refused to sign the consent form. To save her life, his eyes burned with anger as he continued. From this moment on, you're suspended. This hospital does not need a heartless doctor like you. Ethan's face drained of color, but he barely registered the suspension. His entire focus was on the nurse who had been begging him to sign the form earlier. He grabbed her by the wrist, his voice hoarse. Where's Rain? Where is she? The nurse jerked her hand away, looking at him with nothing but disgust. Miss Porter was viciously kicked in the stomach, she spat. Not only is her uterus permanently damaged, but even her internal organs were affected. She lost so much blood that we had to issue a death notice. Her voice grew even colder. She barely survived. She's currently in the ICU, still unconscious. Ethan's lips trembled. His eyes were bloodshot as he turned and staggered toward the ICU. Rain, please don't die. I'm sorry, I was wrong. A sharp, resounding slap landed across his face. Mrs. Sullivan's voice roared in his ears. You bastard. What good is your regret now? Where were you when she needed you? Ethan stood there completely dazed. His mind couldn't function, couldn't comprehend what was happening. He opened his mouth, struggling to say something, anything, but no words came out. Just then, Jessica Carter was dragged forward by the police. Her eyes were red with tears, her delicate doll-like face trembling with fear as she turned to Ethan for help. "Ethan, help me." Her voice was weak and pitiful. For years, Ethan had spoiled her, protected her, given her everything she wanted. That blind devotion had given her the delusion that no matter what she did to him, she would always be forgiven. Even now, after taking away his child, taking away his future, she still thought she could get away with it. Jessica forced a few more tears, her expression even more fragile and pitiful. She bit her lip, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I'm scared." She knew that Ethan had once said this fragile, trembling expression of hers reminded him of her when she was 18. She knew it was his greatest weakness, and she was right. Ethan moved. Jessica's heart swelled with victory. She thought he was coming to save her. She thought he would, as always, defend her, protect her. But instead, bam! A brutal kick landed square in her stomach, sending her crashing to the ground. Jessica screamed in agony, her face turning ghostly pale. "Why?" Ethan's face was twisted with pure rage, his entire body shaking. He looked like a beast driven mad, his fury uncontrollable. "Why did you hurt her?" Jessica panicked, but she was quick to recover. She sobbed harder, her voice choked with desperation. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, Ethan, I swear." Her shoulders trembled as she sobbed dramatically. "It was Rain. She called me a filthy homewrecker. She said she would kill me." Her words came out in a frantic rush. "I was scared. I didn't mean to kick her. I swear it was an accident. Ethan, please, whatever punishment you want, I'll accept it." She fell to her knees, gripping his sleeve with trembling hands. "Please just forgive me. I'm willing to atone for my sins with death." With those words, Jessica Carter suddenly lunged toward the wall, intending to smash her head against it while the police officers were distracted. But before she could, Ethan Sullivan reacted instinctively, grabbing her and pulling her into his arms. The rage in his eyes vanished the moment Jessica started explaining herself. In his mind, the kick he had given her earlier had only been for show, just to appease the police. After all, how could his sweet, innocent Jessica ever do something so cruel? He held her tightly, stroking her back in reassurance. Don't be scared, Jessica. I was wrong to doubt you." His voice was gentle, soothing. "I'll get the best legal team for you. I'll protect you." A satisfied glint flashed in Jessica's eyes. She buried her face against his chest, choking out a sob. "Thank God I have you, Ethan." For days after the incident, I finally woke up. Mrs. Sullivan sat by my bedside, her face pale, her eyes filled with sorrow and guilt as she told me everything. Despite her desperate pleas, Ethan refused to listen. He cut ties with his own parents, blocked them, and focused all his efforts on defending Jessica. Even after being suspended from the hospital, he was still determined to clear her name. "Our family has failed you." Mrs. Sullivan's voice was hoarse, her once elegant face now haggard and aged by at least 20 years in just a few days. Beside her, Mr. Sullivan's hair had turned completely white overnight. But deep inside I felt nothing. The tragic ending of my past life had long since killed any lingering illusions I had about Ethan. I had once been terrified of childbirth, losing my ability to have children. Now maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. Lying weakly in the hospital bed, I rasped out a simple response. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan." The moment I called her Mrs. Sullivan instead of Mom, she visibly swayed, nearly fainting. For the past 20 years I had always called her Mom, but now she understood there was no going back. No matter what happened from here on out, I would never be part of their family again. On the day of my discharge, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan personally handed over a thick stack of evidence to the police and officially filed a lawsuit against Jessica Carter. Meanwhile, Ethan Sullivan, once an internet-famous handsome doctor with over 1 million followers, went online and leaked fabricated accusations about me to manipulate public opinion. He painted me as a jealous, manipulative woman who loved to play the victim. Even while I was unconscious in the hospital bleeding out, the internet was already demonizing me, branding me as a vile woman who schemed against an innocent girl. By the time the court trial began, the hearing room was packed. I was wheeled into the courtroom by Mrs. Sullivan, still too weak to walk on my own. When my eyes met Ethan's across the room, his expression was cold, his lips pressed into a hard line. Mrs. Sullivan had already told me he still believed. Ethan believed Jessica's lies in his mind. Jessica was innocent, merely acting in self-defense. I already knew this because he had texted me before the trial. My parents have lost their minds getting fooled by a woman like you. I already spoke to the people there that night. They all said you were the one who slapped Jessica first. She only pushed you away, and you were unlucky enough to trip over a bottle and fall. Jessica had nothing to do with your miscarriage. You're just trying to frame her. I didn't get angry. I simply replied with a single text. You need professional help. His response. He immediately blocked me. As the trial began, Jessica stood trembling in the defendant's seat, her tear-filled eyes looking pitifully at the audience. Her delicate, fragile demeanor made the spectators' hearts ache for her. Ethan submitted multiple witness testimonies, all carefully selected to support Jessica's claim of self-defense. But that wasn't enough to solidify her innocence. Ethan even launched an online poll through his massive following. Over 1 million people voted in Jessica's favor. With public support on their side, Jessica and Ethan truly believed they had already won. Meanwhile, on our side, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan simply glanced coldly at their son before handing a USB drive to our lawyer. The lawyer plugged it into the courtroom's display system and played the video in front of everyone. The moment the footage began, Jessica's face went completely pale. It showed her mercilessly kicking my stomach again and again, even as blood poured from my body. The entire courtroom fell silent. Even Ethan seemed to lose all color. Online viewers watching the live stream exploded in shock. Jessica staggered back, screaming, "It's fake! It's all fake!" Just then, a young woman entered the courtroom from the witness stand. I recognized her immediately. She had been one of the people Jessica gathered that night. But unlike the others, she had never laid a hand on me. Instead, she had been silently recording everything. Her voice was clear and firm as she faced the judge. I was the one who recorded that footage. I can personally vouch for its authenticity. Her eyes burned with hatred as she turned to Jessica. Jessica Carter bullied my sister until she jumped off a building. Silence fell over the courtroom. But that wasn't all. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan hadn't just gathered evidence against Jessica for attacking me. They had dug up something even more shocking. They had uncovered the truth behind Jessica's past, the truth about how her parents died. All these years, Jessica had played the role of a poor, tragic orphan whose parents had drowned in a flood. But in reality, her parents had been alive before the flood hit. They had told her to apologize to the girl she had bullied, to take responsibility for what she had done. And what did Jessica do? She drugged them on the night before the flood. Jessica gave her parents a fatal dose of sleeping pills, ensuring they wouldn't be able to escape. The girl whom Jessica Carter had bullied into developing severe psychological trauma fled on her own. She was none other than the best friend of the woman now standing in the witness stand. Jessica was completely stunned. Ethan Sullivan, who had remained so confident in her innocence, now looked at her in complete shock. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan had thoroughly investigated her past, uncovering every skeleton in her closet. Not only had Jessica been a ruthless bully, but she was also a vain, money-hungry opportunist. After Ethan started financially supporting her, she squandered his money without restraint. Whenever Ethan was away on business trips, she would use his credit cards to buy influence, bribing her classmates and even taking them to underground casinos. It turned out she had been working with the casino owner, luring wealthy students into gambling. Once those students became addicted and lost everything, Jessica would take a 10% cut of their losses. That was also why, on the night she attacked me, she had so many people backing her up. They weren't her friends. They were her pawns, terrified that she would expose their gambling habits. The revelation sent shockwaves across the internet. The legal casino was raided and shut down. Rumors circulated that the casino owner had placed a $100,000 bounty on Jessica's head. But the biggest revelation was yet to come. Jessica herself was a massive gambling addict, owing millions in debt. While she had been stringing Ethan along, she had also been sleeping with 7 different wealthy men, most of whom were either married or engaged. When the explicit photos surfaced, Jessica collapsed in her seat, her face draining of all color. Ethan, who had been blindly defending her all this time, now sat there with a face as dark as death. His jaw tightened, his eyes burning with rage and humiliation. Grinding his teeth, he spat out, "You disgusting!" When the trial ended, Jessica's reputation was completely ruined. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for her crimes. All of the other individuals involved, from her gambling ring to the underground casino partners, were also convicted and sentenced. Ethan, while not guilty of any crimes, lost his medical license, his career, and all of his credibility. The entire internet hated him, branding him a disgraceful, pathetic excuse for a man. Meanwhile, I had become the nation's most pitted ex-fiancée, the beautiful, tragic woman who had been betrayed. Ever since Jessica's conviction, Ethan had become a lingering shadow in my life. No matter how many times I tried to get rid of him, he wouldn't go away. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, completely disappointed in him, cut ties with him entirely. Ethan kept changing his phone numbers, constantly trying to apologize to me. No matter how many times I blocked him, he would always find a way to reach out until the day before I was scheduled to leave the country. The buyer of my old townhouse called me, sounding frustrated. "There's a guy outside my house claiming to be your fiancé. He won't leave no matter what I do." With no other choice, I went to see him. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. He was filthy, looking like he hadn't taken care of himself in weeks. His body was thin, almost skeletal, with dark circles beneath his bloodshot eyes. His once groomed hair was greasy and unkempt. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red. He stood there stiffly like a child who had been caught doing something terribly wrong. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I had already heard from Mrs. Sullivan that after being kicked out of the family, Ethan had nowhere to go. With his name tarnished online, he had been drugged in public, his vocal cords permanently damaged. When I heard about it, I felt nothing, just like now. Standing in front of him, I felt nothing. "You need to leave," my voice was calm. "You're disturbing someone else's home." Ethan burst into tears. He clutched at his face, sobbing uncontrollably. "I was wrong, baby, please. I was so wrong. It's all my fault. But why? Why are you selling this house?" His breath hitched between sobs. "This place holds so many of our beautiful memories." I smiled for a brief second. Ethan thought I was forgiving him. His crying slowed, his eyes flickering with hope. And then I spoke. "For you, maybe they were beautiful memories." I looked at him directly. "But for me, everything you did to me because of Jessica turned this house into nothing but a living hell." Ethan froze. It was like he had been hit with a bullet. His body collapsed inward, hunched over, his broad shoulders trembling as if he had lost everything. I sighed, losing the last shred of patience I had for him. "Do yourself a favor, Ethan. Stop coming after me. I don't just hate you. I'm absolutely disgusted by you." Those words shattered him completely. After that day, Ethan Sullivan never appeared before me again. 6 years later, after completing my studies abroad, I returned home. I had stayed in touch with Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, who had long since given up on their son. Instead, they had adopted a new daughter, a bright, kind-hearted girl. With her companionship, they had slowly found happiness again. Even their aging appearances had softened, looking younger and more at peace. I had grown fond of my new little sister. She had just won first place on her final exams, and as a reward I had promised to buy her a puppy. That afternoon, we went to a pet store near our neighborhood. While my sister excitedly browsed inside, I stayed outside. I was allergic to fur. Just as I was waiting for her, my eyes landed on a nearby clinic. Through the glass, I saw a man handing out prescriptions. There was something eerily familiar about him, but then I noticed he had a large jagged scar across his face, and his left leg seemed to be crippled. The moment our eyes met, he froze. Then, as if terrified, he covered his face with his hands and bolted from the clinic. I frowned in confusion. Beside me, a kind store clerk noticed my puzzled expression and explained, "Oh, that's the mute doctor. That little clinic opened just last year, next to our store." The store clerk continued chatting. "They say the guy was a doctor when he was younger, but he got fired for making a mistake. He's actually pretty skilled, but apparently his voice is completely ruined. Oh, and last year he married some woman who had just gotten out of prison. Her face was completely disfigured. Guess that's karma for all the terrible things she did. The clerk sighed dramatically before lowering her voice. Honestly, those two are really weird. They fight all the time, screaming at each other. Sometimes it gets so bad they even pull out knives and start slashing at each other. That mute guy, he always curses her, calling her a disgusting jinx, says she ruined his life, made him end up like this. The clerk rambled on, but I remained silent. Just then, my little sister walked out of the pet store, happily carrying the puppy she had chosen. I smiled at her and went inside to pay, but just as I was finishing the transaction, a sharp scream echoed from outside. It was my sister. Heart pounding, I rushed out immediately, fearing the worst. But when I reached her, she was completely unharmed. Instead, the commotion was coming from the clinic across the street. A murder was taking place. I instinctively covered my sister's eyes and turned my gaze toward the scene inside the clinic. A deranged man with bloodshot eyes was stabbing someone repeatedly. The victim lay slumped in a pool of blood, unable to fight back. Even through the horrific injuries and ruined features, I recognized him instantly. It was Ethan Sullivan, the mute doctor, the man who had once been so proud, so untouchable, now nothing more than a pathetic broken figure bleeding out on the floor. The attacker had lost all reason, stabbing Ethan over and over again, his blade slicing mercilessly through flesh. Only after plunging the knife into Ethan's body over a dozen times did he finally pull it out, the blade dripping with blood. But he wasn't done. He turned his gaze toward the woman standing a few meters away, Jessica Carter. She was so terrified she had wet herself, frozen in fear. And then the man started walking toward her, knife still in hand. A week later, the police issued an official statement. Ethan Sullivan and Jessica Carter were both stabbed to death at the scene. The investigation revealed the shocking truth behind the attack. The killer's wife had been sick and had gone to Ethan's clinic for treatment. Ethan prescribed her the correct medication, but Jessica, out of pure spite, switched the prescription. Why? Because Jessica and the murderer had been having an affair, and because she had previously argued with his wife over something as trivial as vegetables at the market. She deliberately gave the woman the wrong medicine. As a result, the wife died. She had been pregnant at the time. The baby she carried had been the only child her husband had ever prayed for. His one and only wish in life. The man lost his mind on the day Jessica smugly texted the grieving husband, taunting him. I'm calling his late wife a pathetic, washed-up woman who couldn't even keep a man. The man snapped. He grabbed the nearest fruit knife, his eyes burning red with pure hatred, and marched straight to Ethan's clinic. The aftermath of their deaths rippled through the city. The internet, once filled with people defending Ethan and Jessica, had now turned into a sea of condemnation and disgust. Some people praised Ethan, saying he had been blinded by love and had paid the ultimate price for it, but most people believed he had dug his own grave. He had chosen the wrong person to trust, the wrong person to protect, and in the end he lost everything. As for Jessica, there was no sympathy left for her. Her name became synonymous with evil, a cautionary tale of how greed, arrogance, and cruelty could destroy a person beyond redemption. The trial of their murderer was quick and decisive. The man confessed to everything, showing no remorse. When asked if he regretted his actions, he simply laughed and said, "They took my world away. I just returned the favor. As for me, I never looked back. I continued living my quiet, peaceful life far away from the chaos of the past." The only remnants of that nightmare were the occasional news articles and the rare conversations where people would whisper about the tragic fall of Ethan Sullivan and Jessica Carter. I never felt anything when I heard their names. Not pity, not relief, not satisfaction, just nothing. It was as if they had never existed. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, my little sister ran ahead, giggling as she played with the puppy I had bought her years ago. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt truly at peace. Then my sister turned back to me and smiled brightly. "Sis, do you think I'll ever fall in love?" she asked. I paused for a moment before smiling softly. "One day," I said. "But when you do, make sure you choose someone who will never make you regret it." She laughed, nodding. "Of course. I want a love that's full of happiness, not heartbreak." I watched her run off again, her laughter echoing in the air. As I looked up at the clear blue sky, I realized I had finally let go of the past, of the pain of them, And for the first time, my future felt like it truly belonged to me.